Live from the center of the earth, it's Hey Listen to This! Welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi. Actually, on all sides of the Mississippi. It is called Hey Listen to This, and it is hosted by two dashingly good-looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one. I'm the only. I'm the undisputed Ryan James Kearns.
And I'm the one, the only, the often disputed Matthew James Durzik. And for those who don't know what we do, every week we decide to take a listen to an album that the other may not have heard or something we may not have listened to in many years. We discuss the album track by track, and we decide what we like, what we don't like, and why do we review an album? Well, one, we love music. Two, we may think that this album has some sort of relevance. And last week, the relevance was a bit of revenge. Well, I wouldn't say revenge, but sort of a recollection on your end, Ryan, as we discussed an album you once hated called Pretty Odd by Panic at the Disco.
So when we talk about, hating an album, and specifically that album, it was more of just hating that artist in general, and, it was specifically coming out of the song 9 in the Afternoon, which is, I think, the top single from that album, so that's the reason why we covered that. I was very happy that we were able to go through that record. It was nice hearing Panic do that sound, and, I haven't checked out any of their other records. Quite honestly, it's probably not going to be on my radar anytime in the near future. But, that was a truly unique experience and a truly unique sound that they were going for that they haven't replicated since. So, I wanted to approach the whole New Year, New Me mentality with approaching albums and music that I've had major hater energy in the past, and I came out pleasantly surprised. It was a pretty odd experience for me.
Yeah, we went from hating the album to liking it more than me. And if you're wondering how that's possible, you can go back and listen to the episode where we discuss it, because I had some thoughts about that album as well. This week, the album of cultural significance is one I have chosen because it is the year 2025, and there are a couple of albums in the hip-hop rap category that turned 25 this year. That means they were released in the year 2000. And Ryan, you had the choice to pick which one we were going to talk about. You chose between Atlanta and Detroit, and you went with Atlanta. So this week we are talking about the one and only Stankonia from Outkast. Now, for those of you wondering what's an Outkast, first of all, congratulations for finding that perfect rock to live under. Please let me know what the rates are. Secondly, basically they are the biggest group to come out of Atlanta hip-hop, with Andre 3000 and Big Boy being the focal point, the group as it were. And they had released a couple albums up to this point. In 1994, they released their debut album with a title that I know but am not going to try to say because it's about 30 words long. They followed that up in 1998 with Aquemini, which was not necessarily super popular, but a little more popular than their first, and started to get them a little bit more of a notice on the critical scene. And that leads us to this album, which is Stankonia. Now, my background with Outkast is a little different because in order to go back to my past with Outkast, we have to go into the future from this album, because I wasn't really exposed to Outkast until the following album, which was Speakerboxx The Love Below, and that had even more success than this one, and songs that a lot of people still know to this day, like Hey Ya, Roses, The Way You Move, and that was just sort of like the apex of Outkast popularity. So that's where I started to listen to them, because they were, had those big hits. And then they really never did anything else after that. Basically breaking up after that, coming back to release the Idlewild soundtrack in 2007, and then completely disappearing yet again. So basically at that point, anyone who had just gotten into Outkast, in order to find out more, had to go backwards. So that's how I discovered this album and the stuff off of here. And that's pretty much where I come from with Outkast. Ryan, what about you?
So my first exposure to Outkast was actually through this album here. Like back in the day when I was developing as a music lover and a music listener, I wasn't as dedicated to listening entirely through albums. I was a child of the TRL era, so songs like So Fresh So Clean, Miss Jackson that was my introduction to the group. So really loved those songs growing up, and then really didn't dive into the full album at that point because kid of the 90s, you buy an album for 2 songs, economics. But yeah, so, and then from there, years down the road, Speaker Box, The Love Below came out, like you mentioned, and I really loved that. I really love the song Roses, and I feel like off of that album, I could be mistaken, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but The Way That You Move is off of that record too.
It is.
Cool. So I'm not crazy. But yeah, I really did appreciate that, those tracks, but never really dove into a full album. And as I progressed through high school and college, I started to really listen to albums in full length. And I know I've came across Stankonia a couple different times, and I've definitely listened to it, but never really dissected it and looked at the group through a lens like we're about to do here today. But yeah, overall, my respect for the group, it's interesting because you get the two, and I know we're going to talk about this, but the two forces of Andre 3000 and Big Boy, and they both bring their own different flavor to the group. And I haven't really followed Big Boy's career post Outkast, but I know most notably, people have been chomping at the bit for a Andre 3000 rap album, and then a couple a few years ago, Andre 3000 released his flute album, his jazz flute album. So he's a bit of an oddball. So, but yeah, overall though, for me, I'm coming at this review through the lens of somebody who's enjoyed the singles before, and really excited to approach a whole album in terms of just seeing what the group can provide.
I am too, because again, it's weird for certain demographics, without getting into too much of a political discussion. Pretty much all you know about Outkast is the hits. So really the sort of trenches of their work come through their albums. And like you said, Ryan, I think that's what we're going to talk about today. So I say we get right into it. And for the record, there are a lot of interludes, skits, and other sort of 1-minute segments on this track. So I think what we'll do is we'll just whoever has the first main track or the next track that's coming up, they could do the intro real quick, and that's it, because I only have one real note for the intro to this album, which is intro, which is just it's kind of laying the groundwork for what's to come. It's got a little weird, a little funny, a little sexy, a little goofy, a little funky, kind of all not really out front, but it's there. And so it goes from that right into the first true track on the album, which is Gasoline Dreams. And right out of the gate, you hear this funky, guitar-driven, almost Hendrix, funkadelic-like backing with the menacing percussion. You have Andre going, all right, all right, all right, just sort of, really just busting through the curtains with that. And right away, too, you can hear Andre 3000 and Big Boy sounding very, very different. Because Andre, he has the backing, and he sounds very soulful and pleading. When he comes out of the gate saying, all my heroes did dope, that he's just sort of philosophizing about how, this worldview that he has of, being inspired by these rich, austere, minds. No. His heroes did dope. He comes from a very sort of shaggy, dingy place, and he's not afraid to admit it. And his verse on this track sounds a lot more song-like and melodic than Big Boy's, which is just a basic rap verse with none of the guitar backing. And he's just sort of, doing what Big Boy usually does, which is, talk about the way of the world and do so with a flow that is relatively unmatched the more I think about it. This also features a verse by Cujo Goody from Goody Mob, a rap group from Atlanta that is featured prominently on this album in a few spots. His verse is pretty solid at the end, not quite to the level of Andre and Big Boy, but man, right out of the gate you have a great track with Gasoline Dreams. That hook with Andre just sort of, flipping the American ideal on its side. That's really cool too. It just missed my top 3. This could have easily gone in there if not for a few other tracks. But yeah, we're starting out of the gate with something very, very strong, Gasoline Dreams. And for the record, I have a top 3 and a bottom 2 for Stankonia.
So for me, I have a top 3 and a bottom nothing.
Ooh.
Now, I know sometimes we kind of hint at is this gonna be a 10? Most of the time it doesn't mean anything. But it's mainly because unless a track personally lands below a certain threshold on my rating scale, I don't put it in my bottom tracks. But yeah, for me, Gasoline Dreams, it really does set it's a little bit of a whiplash compared to what you get from intro into Gasoline Dreams. You get that bounce, baby, bounce. You're like, oh, is this gonna be another traditional hip hop album? Nope. You get that guitar that you mentioned that slaps you right in the face, and especially with Andre's very first bar that isn't all right. It's, don't everybody like the smell of gasoline? Well, burn, motherfucker, burn American dreams. Oh my goodness, he's coming out of the gate shooting from the hip, and his verse is really, really good. I really do like his flow. I did like Big Boy's verse. It's about corruption. I don't know. I like it a little less than Andre's, but that's comparing a 9 to an 8, where it's just he has more of the traditional rap lyric content as compared to what Andre's delivering, and just they're two different kind of creatures, so it's gonna be hard for me to compare them. I'm just gonna analyze them from their own perspectives. But yeah, in the chorus, one of my favorite lines in the chorus is, I hear that Mother Nature's now on birth control, which it's basically taught that line's talking about the fact that hey, society's basically screwing up Mother Nature, and Mother Nature is not producing life or anything like that. So I do like that bar there. The bar that you mentioned about all my heroes did dope, I do like that. I kind of went from that line, I came at it from a perspective of oh, hey, growing up, all of the people that you idolize, oh, hey, turns out they're flawed people. Like they're people just like you and me. And one of my favorite bars from Big Boy's verse is it's not so much about lyrical content, but the way that it comes off and the way that he plays with words here. And that bar is, "Officer, get off me, sir." Like, I thought that was a very clever use of words there. And the guest verse by Cujo is decent, but it's more talking about, like, maybe the African American identity within, like, within America versus where versus like for lack of a better term, like their homeland. And that bar that exemplifies this is, "Not to Africa, because not one of them acknowledges us as a kinfolk." So yeah, for me, like, this is a fantastic way to like kick off the whole album. It really grabs the listener by the throat and forces them to listen to whatever like Outkast is going to be preaching to them. So yeah, it's not a top 3 track for me. And when it came to like my favorite tracks off the album, I basically kind of knew which ones it was like they were gonna be, but I had to like think about which order that they were gonna be in. I mean, I was gonna be pretty much open to like different surprises, and like hey, maybe like Red Velvet would like come out of the gate and like blow me out of the water. But when I get to my favorite tracks, we'll talk about that, man.
Yeah, the fact that you said that, it would not surprise me at all if we happen to have the same top 3 for, I would say obvious reasons, but we'll see. We will see. But yeah, no, I pretty much agree with what you said there, pretty much on all terms. This track, Gasoline Dreams, just bam, right in the face, and like you said, it pretty much forces you to listen to what's going on. It doesn't limp in, it doesn't sort of, try to feel its way out. The intro did that for it, and now this is just like, okay, fun time's over, let's get down to business. So yeah, I am ready to move on to the next set, which is I'm Cool, followed by So Fresh, So Clean.
So I'm Cool, like, the only note that I have there, like the way I'm gonna talk about like when it's my turn to talk about the interludes is basically like a brief note of what's going on, and then we can pivot on over to the next track. So like, in here, you get a girl trying to convince herself it's okay to do cocaine, basically. Like, because you get the, "Oh, I'm cool, it's cool, it's cold, oh, okay." And then you hear like somebody yell in the background. They yell what they yell. So, pivoting over to So Fresh, So Clean. This song is a classic, dude. Like the beat is so iconic. I love the little funky details about it. Like, you get that little like like those little synth moments, and how like things just kind of flow within each other. The chorus again is iconic. I know that sometimes I criticize albums for lack of proper sequencing, but to go from Gasoline Dreams over to So Fresh, So Clean is a bit of a whiplash, but maybe that's why we have that interlude of I'm Cool, just to like, help guide the listener back into a proper state of mind. Talking more about So Fresh, So Clean here. Big Boy's verses are solid. One critique that I'm going to have in several tracks here in the album is that I'm not a fan of Big Boy's flow. It's just sometimes it comes across as a little bit scattered. Maybe I'm not a proper hip-hop fan, because sometimes whenever rappers deliver this kind of like scattered flow and it's like a little bit out of pocket, I tend to be like, okay, come on, man, try a little harder. But I mean, overall though, his verses, they are solid. But I mean, his overall flow is not a highlight for me. Not going to talk about the lyrics though, because they're pretty sexual in nature. So not that we get monetized for this podcast, but I would like to think that maybe my mom listens to episodes like this. But talking about further stuff into the song, the bridge is so solid. I love the call and response dynamic. It's executed so well, and when Andre eventually does come in with his own part, it adds a nice contrast. Still not going to talk about the lyrics because pretty sexual. But overall, though, So Fresh, So Clean, it is a very fresh and very clean track for me. I love it a great deal. I think it was actually my first introduction to the group. It was either that, yeah, I know I hinted at it earlier on in the episode. It was this track and the next track that were my introductions, but I think it's this track here that was my first proper introduction. So Fresh, So Clean landed in my top 3 because you probably could have guessed that. It is at number 3 for me.
Oddly enough, it is also at number 3 for me as well, because a lot of the same reasons that you just mentioned. That, like you said, just the intro to the track, with the beat being locked in and unmovable, is perfect. The synths that sort of creep in to the first chorus, beautiful. The hook itself, classic. I will disagree with you a little bit on your analysis of Big Boy. I understand where you're coming from with it being sort of all over the place. To me, Big Boy's flow for a lot of this album, and really for a lot of Outkast work, is basically just, here's point A, here's point B, find a way to get from one to the other. He's not trying to, flow like Eminem on Lose Yourself or The Way I Am, or something very super flowy, even a Kendrick Lamar in a sense. He's just trying to get stuff out there and put it in this box. So, and I think he does a relatively good job of it for the most part. The other note I have that you haven't mentioned is Andre 3000's verse, which I do like, even though there are some, not only, like you say, very vaguely sexual lyrics, but the references he makes to the likes of Anne Frank and Rick James in the same verse, not necessarily the most salvageable set of lines for not only 2025, but even the year 2000 itself. And I didn't realize this, 'cause I actually have the CD, and I have the liner booklet that they have in the album cover. They actually censored the word Anne Frank in the book. So they censored it and they don't censor any of the swear words. But they censored Anne Frank because they knew, ooh, this might be a problem. So it's just okay, then why did you put it on the record? But whatever. That aside, again, I pretty much agree with you wholeheartedly. This is just a classic track where their flows are pretty much effortless, and everything just sounds effortless, and it sounds super, super clean and fresh. So yeah, it's in my top 3 at number 3 as well.
Okay. I'll comment more about I guess the debate that we're gonna have between Big Boy's flow later on, whenever moments organically pop up within the review here. But are you ready to kick off the next track here?
Yes, and right away we go from So Fresh, So Clean to the big one, the number 1 hit that put Outkast into the national consciousness, which is Miss Jackson. And once again, great intro where Big Boy is talking about, this one goes out to all the babies, mamas, baby mamas, baby mamas. And it's just brilliant there. The hook that Andre 3000 delivers is fantastic. For those who don't know, this song's basically just an apology track by Andre 3000 to Erykah Badu's mother, for she is the Miss Jackson who is dealing with the consequence of her daughter having a kid by Andre 3000. So Andre's part of the song is very much a plea of, mixed of I'm sorry, but also not sorry, of I'm a man, I gotta do this, to maybe I shouldn't have done this, and what is this, to I know what this is. It's a very wavering and confused sort of plea, which I kind of respect because situations like that aren't always cut and dry. And the way he sings it and flows on his verse is just fantastic. Big Boi, on the other hand, sort of uses this song as an opportunity to just kind of rail against relationships and women in sort of a very more generic way, which at first I thought was a mismatch in the song itself, because it feels like he and Dre are on different planets on this song, but somehow it works. Like, somehow his sort of out there nature on his verses is, it fits within the song even though it shouldn't. And there is a lot of, funny moments in Big Boi's verses, talk about medical bills and how he pays that, stuff like that, just all around. And again, some of the lyrics are a little on the vaguely provocative side, particularly in that final verse. But again, the hook, the interpolation of the Brothers Johnson's Strawberry Letter, also a great move towards the end of the song. I mean, this song was a hit for a reason. This song is still in the national consciousness for a reason. People still use the term forever, forever, ever, forever, ever for a reason. And big shocker, I have this one in my top 3 too. I have it at number 2.
The crazy thing is about
oh no.
Yeah, this is my second favorite song as well. So,
oh boy.
Oh my goodness, man. We are dialing up to T here. So I'm gonna talk about I'm gonna first compare Big Boi and Andre here. I feel like within the scope of what they were doing here, Andre is approaching relationships in the American landscape in the turn of the century from a more macro lens, and then Andre's approaching it from a very personal lens. I mean, this song is very personal to him, and Big Boi's just going from a wide spectrum. So, I think that's what they were going for. I understand, how it may come across to the listener, it's just oh, wait, are these guys talking about the same... Are they on the same song? Are they on the same page? But that's the way I took away from it. I really do like Big Boi's flow here. There's a couple of moments that I really did like, especially in Big Boi's third verse, which I'm going to try to match the flow here, but it's really it came across as a really cool moment, and just the way that Big Boi was able to rip off this set of rip through this bar here. It was pretty crazy. So the bar is jealousy, infidelity, envy, cheating, beating in the year 2G, they be the same thing. The way that it comes across, it almost seems like he's almost kind of sputtering through it, but he's doing it in such a silky smooth fashion that I was just oh wow, okay, heck yeah. The forever, 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 ever, that moment's iconic for a reason. It's so cool that the way that Andre is able to almost halt the momentum of the track and just guide the listener back into the back half. And another moment that I do like in specifically Andre's sections is the bar where he's talking about become a magician to abracadabra all the sadder. I thought that was a really good bar, very clever. But yeah, I'm not going to really add so much more to the discussion that you already laid down, because you did a great job introducing the track. I will just say, in terms of hip-hop history, I couldn't, again, I didn't do any deep diving, but I just thought the 1-2 punch of So Fresh, So Clean and Miss Jackson, I would challenge anybody to find a more iconic 1-2 punch in in hip hop history, because like you get So Fresh So Clean, which is a really great single, really great song. It has stood the test of time. And Frank lyrics, be damned. But and then you go into Miss Jackson, which is even elevating the album's momentum up another gear. Oh my goodness, man! I did love this 1-2 punch here.
Yeah, and I would even say with Gasoline Dreams, it's a 1-2-3 punch, because Gasoline Dreams is pretty strong in its own right. So for it to come out, 5 tracks in with the 2 intros, and you already thrown this up, like you're right. There are few albums that have started this strong ever. And yeah, already we have 2 out of our top 3, and I have a sinking suspicion we may be completely in sync off of which our top 3 are. But we will cross that bridge when we get there. Also, I appreciate you bringing up Big Boy's flow on that final verse, because it is absolutely impeccable. Because again, not only is this song fun, it's also very, very well executed. So I am ready to move on to the next track, which is Snappin Trappin.
So here we get a guest feature. I don't want to even say a guest verse, because he does trade bars with Big Boy through several occurrences within the track, and that guest rapper is Killer Mike of, well, I mean, he has his own solo career, but more nowadays he's well known for his work with Run the Jewels, but that's a different album, different artist whatsoever. We're talking about this track here. This song's a bit of a whiplash for me, considering what we just experienced with that 1-2-3 punch of the previous tracks. I mean, it's not a bad track by whatsoever, but this track doesn't feature Andre 3000 at all. And I thought a really cool moment here was when Killer Mike and Big Boy were trading bars. And that was a decent moment. In Big Boy's, solo verse, it just seems like, for me, he ran out of steam in the middle of it, which was a little bit of a turnoff. Again, can't share most of the lyrics due to the sexual nature, especially Killer Mike's lyrics. Oh my goodness. The beat is kind of weird. It's the first time that I kind of wasn't hooked into what the production was doing. I will say, though, the one moment that I did like is the lyrics: the preacher preaching, reaching, teaching, speaking, being, breathing. You're not, your clock stopped, now you're lying in a pretty box, and now the pastor is only talking about the pretty parts of your life. So, let's talk about, dying and, stuff like that. But I think I more appreciated that moment for just how it landed on my ears. But overall, though, I said that I didn't have any bottom tracks in Stankonia, and that is true. This song here, it's good. It goes in the good song bucket for me. I respect what Killer Mike does here in terms of delivering his flow, but still too much of a whiplash, and this kind of goes. I feel like this almost kind of goes away from the Outkast sound and narrative. This almost just seems like another early 2000s hip hop track for me.
I'm pretty much right there with you on all accounts. That beat that is anchoring the song, I wasn't the biggest fan of. It sounds fine, but those little weeb woobs towards the start of the song were kind of a turnoff for me. Basically, you're right. This is just sort of a run-of-the-mill early 2000s, late 90s type of album track in hip-hop. I think Killer Mike and Big Boy do good jobs here, just sort of trading barbs and, just basically going with flow more than any type of, confessional tone like the last song had. I thought the hook was pretty good on it, sort of with the low-pitched vocals that are in there. I thought that was sort of a nice touch. You're right, Andre 3000 is nowhere to be seen on this track. And the one other thing I'll mention is the outro from Jay Sweet. It's not horrible, but I thought it was kind of unnecessary with the sort of fake Jamaican accent at the end. I thought, we could do without this. Fine, but whatever. So yeah, to me, I'm right there with you. It does bring down the momentum of the album a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily surrender so much that there isn't any momentum to be had. Like, you're still realizing, hey, this is a solid rap album featuring solid rappers, and its only crime is basically based on juxtaposition, because it's coming after two of the more iconic tracks, not only in Outkast history, but in hip-hop history overall.
Yeah. Not much else to say about it. Like, there's a lot of tracks here, and the way that I approached, like, I would say, like, a good majority of them, if not all of them, is I didn't try to analyze them through the lens of the grander scheme of what Stankonia was bringing to the table. I was more just saying, hey, I'm going to analyze this track by track and just see what the merits are. Because if I was trying to piece together a narrative or just try to see if this album was very cohesive, this would be a bottom track for me easily. Like, no offense to Big Boy or Killer Mike, like, they do a good job, but, like, it's too much of a whiplash, but by itself, it's a solid hip-hop track. So, moving over to the next section, which kicks off with DF and then goes into Spaghetti Junction.
Yes, and DF, basically the only note about I have is that it sounds like they're trying to make a movie trailer on a CD. Basically, you just have these grand, like, orchestral swells and Andre 3000 speaking at 50 miles a minute. It's fine. It's whatever. You sort of know what to expect. And also, it's just nice to hear Dre's voice again. So that heads into Spaghetti Junction, which isn't really different in its role from Snappin' Trappin', except this time we actually do have Outkast on this track, which is both Andre 3000 and Big Boy. And basically, once again, you have the mismatch that you have on Gasoline Dreams and pretty much throughout the entirety of this album, if we're being completely honest, where Dre is talking about heaven and loose ends and is waxing philosophical about the way of the world, while Big Boy is basically doing Big Boy things. And it's basically more a flow track, much like Snappin' Trappin' was. The only difference is that I really did like the beat a lot more on Spaghetti Junction than I did on Snappin' Trappin'. Here it sounds like it's sort of a mix between a basic R&B track with a little bit of, like, almost like Nintendo 8-bit vibes sprinkled throughout. Aside from that, though, I really did not have a whole lot of notes on this track aside from what I basically said. It's a flow track. They sound good. It's fine. It's another album track. So goes the world.
So, it's thanks to doing, like, this review here that I discovered that Spaghetti Junction was a really cool song. It's not my top song in the album. I'm going to start my discussion by saying that. But, yeah, the lyrical content of the song, the way that I came across it, was just talking about the negativity about being a black man and the dangers of that. Of just like, oh, hey, you might be living in your life, but you just got to be careful where you roam because you might end up getting shot. And just the performances and the chemistry that the duo shows here, like, I appreciate what they were bringing to the table. You get lyrical highlights for me that include, you ought to be ashamed trying to fit in my Adidas, so run like DMC is me, and no, don't get no heater. So, like, I like that play on words. Basically, like a bit of a diss right there. The beat, I really did like the horns and the record scratches added a nice flair. But not much else to really talk about within Spaghetti Junction. Like, you're right on point with your discussion about, like, how just it's very flowy and it's just it's a little bit of a vibe track, but the lyrical content is there if you want to just kind of see what Andre and Big Boy were trying to deliver in terms of like just their experiences about being a black man in America at the time were. But yeah, overall though, Spaghetti Junction, it's a really great song.
Yeah, and only one other note that I'll throw in with this song, and I had forgotten about it until I just looked at the lyrics in the liner just a second ago. Lil Jon getting a shout out on this track in the middle, and it's just like, hey, there's a name that would come to surface in a few years, so nice to see sort of the originations of that coming into play here.
Alright, so I'm going to move on to the next section here of Kim and Cookie, and then I'll call before I come. So, Kim and Cookie, the only note that I have here is girls talking smack. That's basically it. And then going over to I'll Call Before I Come. So we're going into another moment within the album that is just very, very fun and very, very funky, dude. Like, that chorus is just so flippin' tight. Like, as we get further into the album, it's kind of hard to say this because we just talked about, like, Miss Jackson, so fresh, so clean, but, like, I'll just say overall, Outkast knows how to write a good chorus, and the chorus here is just so tight. I love it. Andre's verse is absolutely hilarious, especially at the end where he's talking about, and nah, I don't want to see your thongs. I kind of dig them old school, cute regular drawers, and I will pause for your cause. Like, oh my goodness! Like, I love moments like that where I can kind of laugh and like people don't take themselves so seriously. Big Boy, he had a solid verse. Kind of like same issues that I had with earlier moments within his flow, talking about like earlier on in the album. Gangsta Boo's verse is pretty solid as well. Not really too many noteworthy moments there, and same with Eco's. Like they're good, solid verses. I did like the performances between those two guest artists. And I think the one thing I will say, though, about Big Boy's flow and the way I take issue with it is, like, I think I gravitate towards rappers, full disclosure, my favorite rapper right now, and probably will be until, like, the day that I die or, like, someone else comes along, is Kendrick Lamar. And I'm used to kind of that consistent kind of flow. And, like, I grew up listening to, like, Eminem, and I saw that consistent kind of flow. So that's what my ears more gravitated towards, which is an interesting thing for me to say out loud because like there's several occurrences within like our show here that I tend to like chaotic moments, but I guess it's just my own flavor of chaos that I prefer. But yeah, overall though, I'll Call Before I Come. It's a very fun song. I do appreciate it a lot. It is not my favorite track on the record though.
It's not my favorite track on the record either, but a lot of the points that you made I agree with. Actually, I'll say the one thing I did like about the pre-skip before Kim and Cookie was the background vocals. That sort of the call and response on those were kind of a nice, funny touch. But as far as the main song, I really like the hook, like you said, has a nice, solid R&B flow to it. Like you said, Andre 3000's verse. Like, I appreciate you setting up the lyrics, but my favorite lyrics of his are... glad to meet you. My name is Dre, but you can call me Possum Aloysius Jenkins Andre 3000 for short. Like, come on. Like, he's not even trying to be, like, serious about this. Like, he's just having as much fun as he can. Like I said, I think the other problem with Big Boy, because I wasn't the biggest fan of a lot of his stuff on this album either, but I think it's just, again, juxtaposition the fact that Andre is on another level on this whole album, and Big Boy is just kind of, standing on his perch watching this, doing what he does. And he does a good job for most of it, but a lot of tracks, particularly this one, it feels like Andre shines a little bit brighter, and I thought it was nice to hear... sort of the female counter from Eco and Gangsta Boo on this track because, again, we don't have to get into the lyrics because of those reasons. But the fact is that they sort of present this argument to whatever Big Boy and Andre are presenting. So it's a solid, good album track, but it does not land in my top 3.
Okay, cool. I feel like for the most part we're kind of vibing within the same appreciation of the tracks. I'm curious to see I'm curious to see what your bottom tracks are and how I feel about them. But without any further ado, are you ready to talk about the next track here?
Yes, the next track is B.O.B. This song right here. Right out of the gate, you get that little whispery intro, and then bang, punches you in the face with Andre 3000, giving you some of the best flow him or any other rapper has ever brought to the table. Just when he goes international, you're just like, okay, we're here for a party. We're just in for a really, really good time. And his verse on this track is monumentally good. Like, a lot of this so far has just been Andre trying to push for melodic sense and maybe a little bit of humor. Here he achieves everything on this verse. And like the way he just brings it is so good. Big Boy, honestly, some of his best stuff on the album too. Again, it's a lot more subdued. It doesn't have the same backing. It basically follows the same pattern as Gasoline Dreams, where for the Big Boy verse, it's just beat and him with a little bit of guitar sprinkled in there, which I thought was kind of nice. But that beat, it is enormous. It is guitar driven. It is pretty much a sonic synthesis of everything Outkast wants in that beat. The hook is infectious. And it just, again, it flies at 1,000,000 miles per minute, hitting every note along the way. The outro with the bridge of Bop Your Head Ragtop, followed by the outro of Power Music Electric Revival. Like, if Miss Jackson is a song that makes you appreciate the group, this is a track that'll make you love the group. And you may be surprised to hear this, but it's my favorite song on the album. Like, the second I heard the opening lyrics to this, I'm like, well, there it is. That's just that. There it is. There's the best song on the album. Like, there's not even a competition. It's just right there.
I'd be curious to find this out or maybe take a dive into our back catalog, man, because I feel like for the very first time in the history of our show, like we are in line. We are synced up with our top 3 because this is my favorite track on the album as well. So not gonna step on your toes so much because you did an excellent job, just spelling out the reasons why this track is just pure fire. But just for me, I just love the rapid beat and the intensity that everyone brings. Some points in the review so far, I've criticized Big Boy and his flow, but his flow is right on point with my ears. And they both, Andre's verse, Big Boy's verse, they both deliver pure fire. So one of my highlights in terms of what Andre's bringing to the table is consequences are given for the living. The fence is too high to jump in jail. Too low to dig. I must just touch hell hot. So he's talking about just trying to live life and how crazy it can be. And then Big Boy, one of my favorite moments in his in the track. Hold on, let me try that again. One of my favorite Big Boy moments in this track is pulling off my belt because the weapon's in order, like a 3-piece fish full. I cut your daughter. Yo quiero Taco Bell. Then I hit the border. I thought that was a cool moment. Apparently that's a very sexual, mention because you can just use your own imagination there. But hitting the border is going down on someone. Chorus is fantastic. The outro that you mentioned is pure fire. I have no notes. It's just an excellent track for me. And for me, I was very intrigued to see how I was gonna land. Rate this track over the other two because I knew I loved Bombs Over Baghdad because that was a track that I got introduced to in my college years, and I knew about Miss Jackson and So Fresh So Clean. So like, I'm very content with the fact that this is my favorite track, and I'm also it's an added bonus that it is your favorite track. So we are 1, 2, 3 right in line, except for the fact that you have some you have some bottom tracks to discuss, my friend.
I do have some bottom tracks, and for the record, these are not tracks I necessarily hate. These are just tracks I don't need to listen to ever again. But we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, I'm you'll understand why.
Yeah, and I feel like for the casual, like, Outkast fan, like, they might not be aware of this track because, like, it is a great track and real ones know. But like, yeah, just if you're listening to this review right now, if you've not heard B.O.B or Bombs Over Baghdad, like, do yourself a favor, pause the pod, check out this track, and then resume the pod so we can get our play count up. Nope, just kidding. Anyways, so yeah, for me, moving over to the next track here, which is Xplosion, and if I had to put a track into the bottom tier, like, this could possibly be it. This song is just mainly okay. Like, there's nothing really noteworthy about it. Like, the beat is okay. I'm always a sucker for a sax in a track. Like, that always speaks to me as a sax player. The verses are good. You get Andre's verse where he's talking about, like, hello, Lord, it's me again. I just want to make love to the whole globe and all her girlfriends. I like that, the kind of, like, free devil may care kind of attitude there. We get a guest verse from Be Real, and yeah, I did like what he had to bring to the table. You get lyrical highlights of God only knows all the trouble that grows deep beneath my soul, dealing with you assholes. Like, basically saying, hey, F the world, and, like, oh man, it's hard dealing with the public nowadays. And Big Boy's verse, there's not really much there. I had no highlights. The chorus is okay. It's just, for me, the Xplosion is very much an album track. It's just an okay track for me.
I'm right there with you. And once again, juxtaposition is sort of the criminal aspect here, that it follows up B.O.B, which is just not fair for any track, let alone this one. But despite that, I liked it a little bit as well. I did like the groove on the track, which is almost has like a sort of desert, sort of Middle Eastern vibe to it almost, as mechanical as it is. I think everyone's verses were solid. I did particularly like a couple of moments on Be Real's verse, particularly the line where he says, F double XL, you a size too small. I was like, okay, that's a good line. That's just a really good line there. But yeah, I thought that it was fine. It didn't really, like, super, like, knock it out of the park for me as far as it being, a super duper good track. But yeah, no, I thought it was all right. I thought it was all right.
So before we move over to the back half of the record, beginning with the interlude of Good Hair, Matthew.
Yes, Ryan.
I got a question for you.
And what is that?
I know that you have good hair going on right now, and I know I have, like, maybe, like, mediocre hair going on right now. But, let's face it, the listeners out there right now are like, dude, why are you talking about hair? This is not a video podcast. This is an audio podcast. And if they're putting up with my rambling right now, they really like what we're bringing to the table. And if they really want to help support what you and I do on a week in, week out basis, what are a couple ways that they can help us support and grow the show here?
Basically just continue listening on as you have been, and giving us likes on our various platforms. Again, we're on Facebook, we are on Threads, we are on Blue Sky, we are no longer on X, and we will never be on TikTok. We are on YouTube, as we have our page where we upload our episodes every week. And if you're on YouTube, Give us a like, comment, subscribe. Tell us what your favorite things about the podcast were. And share with a friend, whether you're on the social medias, even if you're on a social media that we don't use. If you put one of our links there, that's awesome. That's awesome. We appreciate that. And also, if you want to reach out to us directly, you could do so by following us at ttheylisten@gmail.com. You can send us a message that way. ttheylisten is also our sort of moniker wherever you're looking for us. It's either Hey Listen to This or TT Listen. Forgot to mention we're also on Instagram. That's a nice thing too. So again, just get the word out there. Keep listening. Tell a friend. And again, for those of you who have made it with us throughout this in the year of 2025, we thank you, and we hope to continue bringing all this good stuff to you, and you giving it right back to us.
There we go. So, getting back into the album discussion here. So, I'm going to have you kick off the next section here, which begins with the interlude, Good Hair.
Yeah, Good Hair, I really did not have any notes other than interlude is as interlude does. It's pretty much is exactly what it is. There's no real connotations there. And then it goes into the next track, which is We Luv Deez Hoez. And not in my top 3, obviously, because that's already been established, but there is a lot of good things I like about this track, particularly the solid, funky hook that Big Boy delivers. And what's interesting about it is that Big Boy's verse are some of the more graphic and funny on the entire record. Obviously, I'm not going to recite a lot of it here because of the graphic nature of it. But what's funny is that, again, the hook implies that these guys love what they do. And the subsequent verses on this track, from Backbone and Big Yip from Goody Mob, also imply that they enjoy this. But Big Boy on his verse implies that maybe he doesn't, particularly at the very end of his verse when he just stops rapping altogether and starts ranting about taking his woman to the Cheesecake Factory, which to me is just one of the funniest moments, not on this record, but just ever. Just like, he's just not even trying to like flow anymore. He's just like, no, I'm just mad and I'm going to like go on like an Alex Jones style rant about this for the next 30 seconds. So like, it's just so funny to me. After that, from Backbone and Big Yip, like the verses are okay, but they sort of lose momentum on the track. They're not as good as Big Boy's verse. But yeah, no, this is probably in the upper half of the album for me, just because of that moment and the funniness of Big Boy's verse. Yeah, that's pretty much where I am with it.
So, I compare this track here to like Call B4 I Cum in terms of my appreciation for it. I like the humorous nature in this track as well as you were alluding to a couple like cool moments and funny moments, especially the discussion about the Cheesecake Factory. For me, like one moment that I'm gonna just talk about that I like that you didn't really hint at so much in your discussion is just the hook. The hook is just so great, especially where it's just like where they have that moment where they're laughing, like, we love these hoes, ha 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 ha. Like that's just guys having fun and guys being guys without being like, too toxic masculinity. But yeah, I love the hook. Love the funky beat. Performances are solid. Had no issues. Even from Big Boy's flow on a performance standpoint. Yeah, I really don't have much else to say other than like, this goes into that same bucket as Call B4 I Cum. In terms of like fun track, funky beat, guys just being guys just enjoying making music together.
Yeah, guys being dudes, the hip-hop version. I think we pretty much expelled what we had to say about that track, so we can move on to the next track on Stankonia, which is Humble Mumble featuring Erykah Badu.
So this song is so good, dude. Like it it could have easily knocked out one of the big three in terms of my appreciation for. Well, it could have easily knocked out one of my. It could have easily knocked into my top three tracks on the album. I'll talk about the positives, and I will let you know why this track did not make it into my top three. Like, the hook and just how bouncy everything is, especially right out of the gate. It's just so infectious that I was just like, oh, okay. So this is the reason why we do these reviews. Like, I'm able to dive into, deep tracks like this, deep album cuts, and, take away, oh, hey, this is one hell of a song. The verses are really solid. I do like this moment in Big Boy's verse where he's talking about, everything don't always happen like you plan it, demand it, overstand it, then you handle it, fuck wishing you missing that ambition on your mission, which is basically just saying, hey, life doesn't always happen the way that you plan it, but you gotta keep having that desire to keep moving forward, keep being better. The reason why more positive here is Andre's verse. He's talking about, what if I looked at you in a microscope and saw the dirty organisms living in your closet? Would I stop and would I pause it? Basically, kind of criticizing people for being over analytical about people's lives. Love the beat change up in Andre's verse. I thought that was a nice little touch. The reason why this track doesn't land in my top three is that we get this, infectious groove that kind of could rival Bombs Over Baghdad, if I can be completely honest with you. But when Erykah Badu comes in, the way that she halts the momentum of the track and the flow, it is jarring for me. Later on in the track, she does establish a flow that would have worked well within the song, but it's too much of a whiplash for me. But overall, though, Humble Mumble, great track.
I agree with you on the overall idea that it is a great track, because I did like it quite a bit as well. I disagree that I thought Erykah Badu singing was pretty solid. It wasn't magical, and I will say that hearing her towards the end did make me want to hear the hook more. I was just kind of oh, here it comes the hook. But aside from that, again, I think Big Boy's verse is a Big Boy verse. You know what you're getting. Andre's has this particular line of, speeches only reaches those who already know about it. This is how we go about it. I thought that was a real nice touch. And again, that hook, like you say, I would not put it on the level of B.O.B, but I know where you're coming from. It's definitely got that infectiousness, that sort of very percussive, in-your-face nature that is on that same wavelength, but I wouldn't quite put it as high. I would probably put this towards, I'd say it's in the top half, maybe leaning towards the middle as far as my rankings of songs on this album, because it is a very good track, but I didn't quite have as much elevation for it as you did.
Okay. So I feel like we can move on to the next set here that begins with another interlude. Actually, I would say this next 1-2 set, they're really two short tracks, but I'll let you kick it off with another interlude. I feel like you're taking a lot of interludes here. But the interlude is Drinking Again.
Yeah, Drinking Again is the next interlude on this track, which, more or less, the only note I have about it is, like the horns. That's it. It's pretty much all it is. It's just, I like the horns, and aside from that, it's an interlude. Then the track after that, which is simply entitled Question Mark, basically just a flow track on the highest order. It's really short, and it just sort of goes in and out as quickly as humanly possible. And it very much reminds me of a track from a Tribe Called Quest called What, at the near back end of the Low End Theory, where Q-Tip is just sort of releasing a bunch of questions under a pretty solid, simplistic beat. Here, it's basically that on cocaine, because we're going at 100 miles per hour again. And again, the flow is good. It's solid. But it's so slight and short that I really don't have anything else to say other than it does, like you say, serve as sort of a second interlude, essentially, for the track.
So, yeah. I don't really have any other notes on Question Mark that you haven't already covered. I mean, Andre's flow is super tight. And the one thing I will say, though, to kind of make sense of the Drinking Again interlude and, like, why this track follows that immediately. So, like, Andre's talking about, like, he's questioning, like, he's throwing all these questions out, but, like, what makes somebody do this? What makes somebody do that? And in the interlude, you get this, like, guys just being depressed, they're drinking and blah, blah, blah. And at the very end of this track here, that being Question Mark, you get the answer to what makes mankind have all these main flaws, and that's alcohol. Because you hear, like, the sound of, like, drinks being filled up. But yeah, I thought that was a cool moment, but you would have to essentially live on genius.com to kind of pick that up. But I'm going to kick it over to Red Velvet here, and I'll lead off the discussion. Decent song, very much an album track for me. The beat is solid. I love, it's another kind of like spacey kind of beat, and the hook is okay. Just nothing too crazy about it, but it's not bad of a hook. I really did like Big Boy's performance here. I like the line where he's talking about, like, make sure that you prioritize your life so you can tell people and brag to them about, like, how you bought your kids some tennis shoes. And then it was a cool moment where they manipulated Andre's vocals on his verse. I did like the line about, like, talking about Bill Gates and how he doesn't dangle diamonds in the face of peasants. That was a great moment. The middle section is a fun bridge. I like that. But yeah, overall though, like, Red Velvet as a whole, it's trying to preach about, like, just being humble and, like, not being very braggadocious and just living life the right way. It's a decent song, decent track for me.
So you may be surprised to hear this. This is my least favorite track on the album.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead. Preach, man, preach.
So right out of the gate, the two things I disagree with you most on this are the beat, which I didn't think was super great. Like, it wasn't horrible, but it didn't really stand out for me. And as far as Dre's pitched up vocals, I was not vibing with those at all. Like, I'm sure, like the verses are pretty good, but as soon as I hear his vocals being, like, sped up like that, like, something in me was just like, no more of this, please. Just no more. Big Boy's verse is fine. It pretty much follows the same category as most of his other verses on the album tracks. Got a little bit of braggadocious nature in there. And I have no idea what turning Pound Cake into Red Velvet is. If I had to guess along the lines of this album, it's probably something very graphic and sexual, so I'm not going to even try to go that route. But yeah, like, just, again, the beat wasn't that great. Dre's pitched up vocals were kind of annoying, and it stood out enough where I had to say, no, I can't do this. So Red Velvet is my least favorite track on Stankonia.
I could totally respect that, and maybe on a second listen, I'll maybe approach the track from a different lens. Again, it's not like, in terms of appreciation, I would probably throw, like, Humble Mumble over Red Velvet. Like, this was very much like an album track for me, but I totally respect your opinions. So, once again, we find you talking about another interlude. I don't know why this is becoming a bit within my own enjoyment of doing this review, but so the next section is kicked off with the Cruisin' in the ATL.
Yeah, Cruisin' in the ATL, which It has a nice fake positive interlude of, just cruising the ATL and, things are happy, things are vibing, things are whatever. It is what it is. Then it goes into the next track, which is, just gonna call it what it is. It's the name of the track. It's Gangsta Sh. This track very much is a track I thought better of the second time I listened to it, because it's basically just an Atlanta hip-hop showcase, and that hook, with it being as quick and rapid as it is, kind of gets under your skin really well. But aside from that, the verses from Big Boy, Andre 3000, and the guests on here, which are Slim Calhoun, C-Bone, and Timo Goody, they're all solid in their own respect. Particularly Timo Goody being quite fired up. It sounds like he's ready to fight somebody, just in the way he delivers his verse. Just full on, in your face type of vibes. Aside from that, though, it is a overall solid album track, just featuring great performances by everyone involved. Not obviously in my top 3, probably in the same category as some other tracks where I sort of have it towards the middle, but near the top, if that makes any sense. It's good. It's good. It goes in the good song bucket.
Yeah. I can totally get that. I feel like by this point in the record, this might be the last really good song for me. There's a couple other tracks that, they're coming up relatively shortly because we're nearing the end of the record here, that are good. But this is one of the last fun tracks. The chorus that you mentioned, I really love the flow that it brings. Big Boy's verse is really cool. I like that echoey effect that he has on his vocals. I thought that was a nice touch. The back and forth between C-Bone and Big Boy in the second verse is fun. The other verses that you mentioned were solid. It's just overall a solid track for me. For me, I agree that this is probably within the middle upper end. I would probably put this close to, I don't know, a song maybe slightly under Spaghetti Junction, but it's a fun track for me. It's up there with Humble Mumble and a couple of the other tracks. So I'm gonna move over to the next track here, which is Toilet Tisha. So awkward song titles aside, this song, it's very interesting in the sense that the story behind it is about this. It's talk about teenage pregnancy and how this one girl who got pregnant when she was 14 ended up unaliving herself because of just the pressures of society and what her family was gonna say. I really do like the song quite a good bit. The funk, the beat is solid. The contrast between Andre's soulful section and Big Boy's storytelling verse, that was executed to the T. The screaming in the middle is heartbreaking for me. It's just, catch me on a different day. This could have been another contender to crack my top 3. I think the reason why I didn't put it in my top 3, though, is the fact that I was more hooked into the content of what the song was providing as opposed to what it was actually doing from a songwriting perspective, if that makes any sense.
It does, and I like this song too, although, again, for as dark as it is, we've covered some dark songs on this podcast, whether you're talking about Joni Mitchell's Little Green or the penultimate track off of Spanish Love Songs is Brave Faces, Everyone. There are songs that are just bleak in its nature, and this track might be the bleakest of the bleak. It is a dark song. I agree with you wholeheartedly that breakdown in the middle where the mother is screaming and pleading is very heartbreaking. My only critique about this song is the fact that because it's so dark, that it almost feels like Andre's vocals are a little too, I don't want to say nonchalant or even positive, but it doesn't match. Like, it feels way too, like, funky and soulful, and the way he says, toilet Tisha, sure gonna miss ya. Like, it almost seems like it's not deep enough for the subject matter it's covering. Like, Big Boy basically spells out what is going on, and he does so very well. And I understand what Andre was trying to go for here, but yeah, no, it's a good song, but I feel like it could have used a couple of tweaks. It's not my second least favorite track on the album, though.
Curious to see what that second least favorite track is, because we only have. I bet you it's Prenup, the interlude. No, just kidding. But yeah, we only have 2 official tracks left. If I had to take a guess of what your other bottom track is, because you're leading off Slum Beautiful. I'm going to say Slum Beautiful is... No. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to say the title track, Stankonia Stanklove, is your least favorite. Well, your other least favorite.
And you would be correct, and we will get to why when we get there. But I will start off with Slum Beautiful, and this is definitely a lighthearted change from Toilet Tisha. It almost feels like a prelude, in a sense, to Toilet Tisha, sort of how Andre is going to the ghetto and saying, hey, baby, what's up? You are beautiful in this slum, and you are beautiful for the slum. Which, isn't necessarily the most heroic note to ever base a song around, but here we are. Big Boy's performance, once again, is solid. It's not necessarily standoutish, but it's solid. And also, hey, it's CeeLo Green from Goody Mob. And surprise, surprise, his verse is actually pretty good, too. It's not really a super standoutish track. I'd probably put it in the bottom half of the album, honestly. But it's not bad. Like, it's fine. It's a solid album track that I think does its job of bringing things back, in a sense, from the absolute depths that Toilet Tisha was.
So, yeah, I would be curious to see what my appreciation for this track would be if it was, like, resequenced into earlier in the album, because, like, with this track with it just being, like, a fine track, like, we're, like, 20-something tracks in at this point, including the interludes, so listener fatigue for me especially was a thing. But, yeah, it's a fine track. Like, the hook is really good. Love how smooth the song is overall. And, like, this moment in Andre's verses, especially in the first verse, I really did like where he's talking about, like, girl, what's your frequency? And can I come there frequently? I thought that was a cool moment. Big Boy's verse is alright, nothing to write home about. I did have a critique that I didn't like how CeeLo's verse was produced, not in terms of his, like, performance or lyrical content, but it just wasn't very pronounced. The outro in this song here, where Andre's talking about, like, hold on, let me pull up the lyrics here, where he's talking about, and I'd like to say that I love to make love to every molecule of you, and that if you want to spontaneously combust, that's what we will do in unison. That was a fantastic way to end off the track. A very fun moment. I like the moments in here where you could see Andre's humor and how, like, just crazy and fun he is. But yeah, Slum Beautiful, decent track. Very much, like, it's in the good song bucket. If it was maybe if Big Boy's verse had a little bit more substance to it, I might have liked it a little bit more. And if CeeLo had a little bit more of a pronounced guest verse there, it could have crept into, like, a better appreciation tier for me. But without any further ado, I'm gonna kick off the the last leg of the album here, which is going to start with Prenup and then go into the title track here, Stankonia. So, Prenup, basically, guy asking girl to sign a prenup after he proposes to her. That's basically it. And one thing I will say, though, because we didn't mention it throughout any of the interludes, is just a unique moment within the interludes in themselves. Is at the end of every interlude, you get break! So, like, yeah, I thought that was a fun marker and a way to get the listener back into the mood of the album. But yeah, Stankonia. For me, this song here, it's very smooth, very soulful. It's leaning into maybe that Marvin Gaye's, like, hey, let's get it on kind of, like, mood. Like, the hook is really tight, especially with the guitar working so well in the background. You get, let me lyric this up here. Andre talking about, you make me understand what it means to be in love once again. And then Sleepy Brown, that verse is very, very, very steamy. Not going to talk about it so much because, again, I want my mom to be able to listen to this episode. Specifically my mom. But no, but one critique that I'm going to have with the title track here is that Big Ruby's... I might be mispronouncing that. Like that verse that is at the very end, it kills the mood. It creates what was supposed to be like this very soulful sexual kind of track to end off the whole album, and it basically throws not hot water, cold water over the whole thing, and it surrounds the listener with a wet blanket. Like it's just. It kills the mood, kills the vibe of what is a very solid way to end off the album.
Yeah, so as you had predicted, this is my second least favorite track on the album. And I'll come out and say that I appreciate what Andre 3000 was trying to do with this track, because you're right, it basically is a hazy, digitized sex jam on par with, Let's Get It On or something like that. And earlier we were talking about how in the one song, Andre 3000 was talking about wanting to make love to the whole world. This sounds like him trying to do that. So I understand what he was going for. And I agree with you that Sleepy Brown verse is just absolutely not suitable for work. My problem with this track and why it's in my bottom two basically comes down to the execution of one word. And that word is Stanklove. Because the way it sounds, that over-digitized bwam, 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 and how it's beaten to death over the course of this almost 6-minute track, I was not a fan of it. If Andre had played it straight and just went with sort of a basic harmonized vocal, I'm not putting this in my bottom two. I agree. The guitars and the drums on the chorus sort of doing this weird sort of flip around beat. I like that. I thought Andre's verse was fine. I thought Sleepy Brown, despite the graphicness, was fine. I agree that Big Rube's verse wasn't as good, and that outro stays way too long. This track should be 4 minutes long, and somehow it almost pushes 6. I didn't appreciate the slowed down bit at the end where it sounds like a mix between what you just heard and Untitled from The Cure. I was not a fan of that as much, where it's slowed down. Again, I appreciate the attempt on what was trying to be done here, but it did not quite work for me.
Yeah, I can respect that. I did like the execution of Stanklove, but tomato, Potato Potato. Actually, who says potato? Psychopaths do. But anyways, yeah. Anyways, you know what? What is a very definitive thing that we both can agree on?
Let me see. Would it perhaps be the fact that we did it?
We did it, man. We journeyed through Stankonia, and we came out the other side. Yeah, I couldn't think of anything else, any other clever turns of phrase there. So I'm gonna have you go first in terms of your overall thoughts and rating on the Stankonia by Outkast.
Yeah, what an album. What an album this is. Like, it's weird because it feels so immensely top-heavy. Like we mentioned, coming out of the gate with Gasoline Dreams, So Fresh, So Clean, and Miss Jackson. Like, no album is going to maintain that throughout its entire duration unless it's like one of the greatest albums of all time. And this album, still without that, is kind of up there. Like, songs like B.O.B. and Toilet Tisha, and I'll throw Humble Mumble and Spaghetti Junction in there. Like, they're not, like, on the same level, well, aside from B.O.B., obviously, but even the album tracks are, like, fine. They're good. Like, for the most part, they are good. And even the bad ones on here, like Stankonia and Red Velvet, are not horrible. They're not completely unlistenable. They're just things I don't have to listen to ever again. But within the album itself, I kind of think back to when we talked about Short and Sweet by Sabrina Carpenter and how I wasn't really a fan of Bedchem, but I still gave that album a very high rating because I thought that track was at least, listenable for some of its particular parts, and somehow is still in the top 40 right now. I don't get that. And then also how, a track that's completely unlistenable is different from a track that is merely meh or lacking. And that's what these two tracks were. So overall, I thought Stankonia is just a really fantastic album. It's probably one of the best, if not the best album that has ever come out of the Southern hip-hop, especially the Atlanta scene. And I'm just going to give it a 9 out of 10. It's really, really good.
So for me, Stankonia, like I was most excited about checking out the album, especially after my reaction after last week's review. But yeah, this album is a classic, and I'm very glad that we reviewed it. Obviously the hits are the hits, and they are hits for a reason. But the deep cuts are really solid. It's thanks to doing this review that I've really appreciated songs like Humble Mumble. Really ignited my love for Call B4 I Cum, and even We Luv Deez Hoez. I can name at least a half a dozen other tracks here that I really do like. Not the biggest fan of Big Boy in terms of his flow delivery. And some of the songs, they kind of, they do miss a little bit, and they don't feel like they're an Outkast kind of track, but they're good in their own right. So yeah, for me, I'm gonna take take your rating and take it down at least one notch, and I'm gonna give Stankonia by Outkast a solid 8 out of 10.
All right, so we have a 9 and 8, so that averages out to an 8.5.
Because math.
Because math works, everybody. So, my next recommendation based off of this album, honestly, if I could be completely bare bones honest with you, I didn't even think about it until 30 seconds ago. I was like, oh crap, I have to recommend an album based on this. And because I really have not dug into any other Outkast per se, I am just going to sort of let the cat out of the bag, and we're not going to review this album for a while. But I am going to recommend the album The Marshall Mathers LP by Eminem. And thinking about it, it makes sense because it's also a very album of 2000s in the fact that it's very flow-based. It's got a lot of very memorable songs on there. It's got a lot of songs that feature different artists. And we will review that album soon. I don't know when, but we will review that album, and I'll give you my further detailed thoughts about that. But Marshall Mathers LP is where I go, because 2000s vibes.
So for me, my next album recommendation, I'm being another basic Sam here. I'm just gonna say, just go to their next LP, that being Speaker Box and the Love Below by Outkast. Fantastic record. Has one of my favorite songs by Outkast on there, Roses, one of my favorite lines in there. And then The Way You Move is a great track as well. But yeah, if you appreciated Stankonia and you want to go to another album, that would be an easy recommendation for me.
So if you have not listened to either the Marshall Mathers LP by Eminem or Speaker Box The Love Below by Outkast, first of all, once again, congratulations. I really need those rates on that rock that you live under. But check those out and give them a listen. So we have one more piece of business to talk about, Ryan, and that is on your end.
So for the month of February, I am gonna, I threw out the gauntlet to Matthew here, kind of upended his momentum of what he wanted to talk about, and thank you, Matt, for being such a good co-host here. I wanted us to really dive into, really embrace what February is, which is Black History Month. So for the month of February, even if we just throw out a Discog draft in there for some reason, like the artists that we're going to be covering are they're African American artists. So that being said, for our first review of Black History Month, hey, listen to this 2025. I'm going to have you pick between two condiments in terms of what we are going to be covering. So I'm going to have you pick between Dijon mustard or barbecue sauce.
Ooh. Boy. I'm just going to go based off of my actual personal preference in life and not the hidden context behind those words. I'm going to go with barbecue sauce.
All right, cool. I'm actually kind of curious if you knew what those condiments were going to represent. But so for next week, we are going to be covering Beyonce. And the album that we're going to be covering is her 2016 release, Lemonade.
Let's go!
Beyonce has finally entered the chat.
There we go.
Oh man, I'm really excited. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've not listened to Lemonade by Beyonce, once again, both me and Matt would like to know what are the rates that you have for that rock that you've been living under for the past, almost decade at this point. But yeah, just make sure you check out that record before next week's review. That way you can have opinions on the record, and then you can have opinions on the opinions that we bring to the review. But yeah, I really have nothing else to say about this review. How about you, man?
I really don't either, and I know we've been joking a lot about people who are not listening to all these albums living under a rock, but we're just joking with you. We are very sorry to our listeners, and we are for real.
Break!